Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Anna, and thank you to Daniel and all of his team for organizing such a wonderful conference. The last 3 days have been hectic. I've bumped into so many people I've known for so many years, and it's wonderful to have so many positive and collaborative conversations about helping to further the conservation of manta and devil rays. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, a bit about myself, the history of the Manta Trust, and some examples of the work that we do. And I get asked this question a lot: why manta rays? What is it about these animals that that has captivated you, that's drawn you into the last 20 years of my life studying these animals? And it's a hard question to answer in some ways, and I wish the easiest solution would be to just take the person who asked the question into the ocean to spend time with these animals, because there's something extremely awe-inspiring about them, something captivating. I feel like they draw people through the looking glass into the oceans, captivating them and making them understand what is at stake if we choose not to protect our natural heritage. For me, these are animals I've been fascinated about for the last decades, and I've dedicated my life to trying to conserve them and using them as an emblematic flagship species to try to engage people in ocean conservation more broadly. And this fascination started after I graduated from the University of Plymouth in 2003. I got a job working for the Four Seasons Resorts in the Maldives. I was amazed that they gave me the job. I was working on a luxury liveaboard vessel and traveling around the country, diving and snorkeling with the wildlife, getting paid to do it. And literally week one, you can see me here diving with a manta ray. I was stunned at how amazing these creatures were. And I quickly realized that you could also identify every individual using the spot patterns on its belly. And so I started to collect the individuals in a database, and I also started to think about whether I could turn what was a sort of a glorified snorkel guiding job into a actual research program. So I approached the resort management. They were opening a new resort about 100 kilometers to the north, and I said, hey, wouldn't it be great if you had a manta expert in the team and a project? And they said yes, and to my eternal gratitude, the general manager supported the idea, and for the last 20 years, the resort has been continuously supporting a research program in the country. And when I first moved to Bar Atoll, which is sort of central north in the Republic of Maldives, I wasn't sure that it was the best place to be to study manta rays, because I'd been traveling around the country and diving and snorkeling in other places that I thought were much better for these animals. But within a few months of being there, speaking to some of my Maldivian colleagues, they told me there was a special place called Hanifuru. And it's not really a bay, but we call it Hanifuru Bay. This is cul-de-sac of reef in very shallow water. And if you can probably see at the bottom here, a couple of manta rays. They aggregate in this bay for foraging for several hours a day for about half of the year during the southwest monsoon. And it truly is a magical place. You can have aggregations of up to 250 animals all together in a very confined space, feeding for several hours at a time. So jackpot, I couldn't believe my luck having this amazing aggregation site. So I set about researching the animals. I grew the program. I got funding from Save Our Seas and some other organizations. I was able to increase the number of personnel. We started doing masters and PhD programs, and it's great. The animals seemed to be safe. It was really interesting behavioral ecology research. But then, after several years, the program had expanded to include hundreds of interns, and today the charity supports about 15 full-time staff, and they're spread throughout the country in different resorts and working in local communities, and several of them are here at the conference, so please do go and speak to them if you want to learn more about the program in the country. But then I took some trips to Sri Lanka and was exposed to something completely different. It was actually not far from here at the Colombo fish market. I was writing a book with Thomas Peshak, the National Geographic photographer, and Tom and I were getting up early every morning for a week or two, going to the fish markets, and it was just pile after pile of dead manta rays and mobilid rays. And I realized that everything wasn't so rosy for these animals, and there needed to really be efforts to try to address these fisheries, which were to some extent being driven by the demand for their gill plates. So there's bycatch, there's targeted fisheries in some places around the world. And unfortunately, as I spoke to colleagues, I realized that this was a problem that was much broader than just Sri Lanka. And so over beers one night, Tom and I hatched a plan to create a charity. I already had the project in the Maldives, but that wasn't going to be large enough and focused enough to address these really big problems that we're starting to realize were present. And that's why I started Manta Trust. And that was in 2011. And it's a UK registered charity. The focus is on conservation. We do that through collaborative research, education programs. And we're trying to address the threats and to do it in a very strategic way. Right back in 2014, actually, during Sharks International in South Africa, a group of us got together, including many of the people that are here in the room today, working through an IUCN grant to come up with the first strategic plan for thinking about how to address the threats that these animals were facing. And over the years, that's evolved through a variety of different iterations. Some have been external to the Manta Trust, so thinking globally across all organizations, how can we address the threats through a more science lens, bringing in more strategic policy focus, and then looking into how we need to have a more education diversity strategy as well, right the way through to much more impact monitoring and adaptive management efforts that we're doing today. And come on, computer. Here we go. And this has led to the creation of our current 5-year plan. So what we've really tried to do is drill down into what the key threats are, and then to work backwards from that to try to provide all of the resources and funding and strategic oversight to address these threats. Not surprisingly, the first two biggest ones are focused on fisheries, and I'll talk more about that later. But of course, there are other threats to these species as well. And all of this work is underpinned by importance of governance. Because we're a UK charity, I have a board of trustees, we have advisory board, we have structures in place to really ensure that we think not just through, okay, these are the outputs that we want to see, but how are we going to achieve that? Is the funding in place? Is there a strategic plan to ensure that we do that correctly and that we work efficiently and effectively to achieve these goals in a timely manner? And I would be remiss not to say that the Manta Trust is an umbrella organization. It's operated by a core team of about 15, but we rely on our collaborations heavily. We have, at the moment, about 32 affiliate projects, independent organizations, and you're going to hear from Manta in a minute, that we work with all around the world in mobilid range states. And some of these projects focus more on education. Some of them, like Daniel's, focus heavily on fisheries management, as well as obviously policy. And so it's a combination of trying to address our big global strategy and working with our affiliates to help them and obviously then help us to work towards these goals. So it's a constant collaborative back and forth. We can help our affiliates in a number of ways. We provide lots of assistance through whether that's fundraising, so directly giving grants or helping to raise grants for our affiliates and obviously for the central charity. We have several full-time fundraising team members. For those of you that have been here, might have gone to Jazz's talk on media and comms. We have huge education outreach programs as well, scientific expertise, help with strategic planning, etc. So we try to provide that sort of expertise in personnel at the high level that many of our affiliates don't have the actual staffing or capacity within their organizations. Because we're a registered organization, actually not just in the UK, the Managed Trust has sort of satellite registered foundations in Australia, in the US, I mentioned the Maldives. And so that enables us to channel funding through sources of revenue that wouldn't be possible for our affiliates, and then we can pass that money through to them. So we can also assist with just the practicalities of moving money around in a world that often has barriers of in that kind of area. It's also important to have a brand. The Manta Trust is this platform through which your voice can be amplified. So we can help with directly putting in place the media content, the websites, etc. But we can also amplify messages and have a clarity to cut through the noise to ensure that what we're trying to achieve is received to the broadest and the most targeted group of people possible. And obviously events like this, we can help raise funds to bring our affiliates, and we can also support through documentary making, filmmaking, etc. And then lastly, on the right, we have a wide number of resources that we make available. I'll just give a plug out to those. At lunchtime today, we'll be having a session on this new guidebook here. It's available in multiple languages. So anyone that's interested, who wants to learn more about how we actually have gathered together a lot of the information in a way that will enable people working in fish markets and landings, or people that are out in the ocean who want to collect observational data on these species, condense 20 years of knowledge into a guidebook that hopefully is useful for that purpose. So we have lots of resources, codes of conduct, data collection protocols, etc. A number of different portals online as well. There's education portals, so our education team put lots of effort into creating materials for all different age groups, right away from young primary school kids up to university students. Our research portal, this is where we has a repository for all of the publications that the Managed Trust and our affiliates have produced. We try to make everything open access. So where possible, all of the information that's published in the literature can be made available to the public without being behind a paywall. It's also distilled into really wonderful, easy to digest infographics and other forms of more brief communications for the public. And then on the left, we have Manta Base, which is a new platform that we're rolling out at the moment. At the moment, it's in Japan and the Maldives, and it contains these huge databases of photo ID sightings around the world. So the Maldives alone has like 100,000 sightings of about 7,000 different manta rays. And this is a huge resource. It enables researchers to go in and look at a whole variety of different topics, whether that's reproductive ecology or population size or threats. There's a lot of additional information that's tied to all of these sightings, and we make this platform available. It's got integrated photo ID recognition technology, and it's something that we hope will engage the public as well. Everyone can create their own accounts or track their own manta rays, and so it's a great way of engaging the public in the research, but providing a tool for the researchers as well. And this means that over the years, charity has grown significantly. The graph just shows the number of personnel through the years. It started off with just me for the first 5 or 6 years. And then as the charity became established, we started to increase the number of personnel. We've also increased the amount of money that we can spend every year. We're still a relatively small charity. Last year, we gave out, or we spent £1.12 million. But we believe that impact is significant towards the conservation of these animals. And I have a short video to just highlight that. So that's a bit about the Manta Trust, how it got from my obsession with manta rays to this big organization. And, being here at this conference and just seeing the amount of colleagues that there are present and looking ahead at the schedule, I know we're kind of dominating the next few hours in this room. I'm really obviously humbled and proud of what the organization has achieved. And I thought just for the second part of this presentation, I would talk you through sort of how the work that the organization has been doing. And I must stress that this is by no means a Manta Trust show. To achieve the kind of things I'm talking about here requires a massive commitment by hundreds of people working across dozens of different organizations, all with different expertise, different things that are essential to achieve these outputs. And ultimately, the governments of the world, the ones that make decisions at the high level, whether it comes to CMS or CITES. You'll also notice that I age considerably as we go through this presentation, and Daniel does too, so that's also good to know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we go from passion, research on the ground, to actually achieving some really important global policy measures. And right back at the beginning, the first thing I did was reach out to people like Sarah Fowler and other experts in policy and say, look, how do we get from all these dead animals to trying to put in place protections to regulate the trade? And just to go back again and clarify that mobilids, although they're fished and consumed locally, often caught as bycatch, which sometimes is discarded as well, there is a big demand for their gill plates, and those gill plates are traded internationally from the source countries to mostly Southeast Asia. And increasingly, their meat is also being traded across borders. So trade is a big part of the threats to these species. And if you're going to address trade, then CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, is the way to do that. So I said, well, hey, let's just push for appendix listing. Appendix 2 regulates trade. Let's try to go for that. But the people I spoke to said, well, hang on a minute, it's very difficult to get to that bar. And one of the first things you should try to do is jump over some of the slightly lower hurdles beforehand. And they said, focus on CMS, which is the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species. And we agreed that the first approach would be best to focus on the mantas and not the devil rays. Not because the devil rays were less threatened, but we had less research. At the time, we didn't really have much data on the mantas, but there was enough to do some IUCN Red List reassessments, moving the mantas to vulnerable status, and there was enough to put together a proposal. Mantas are much more charismatic. There was a lot more attention on them globally. There was also a global review of the economics, so the value of mantas in tourism, diving and snorkeling worldwide. Mary, who's in the middle of the picture here, led that study. And that was really important because it demonstrated an alternative livelihood for these animals in places where they're often exploited. So demonstrating that these animals are important and getting the public behind the campaign was also really valuable. And so in 2013 in Thailand at the CITES COP, the proposal was put forward and passed. And so amazing, manta rays are now listed under Appendix 2. And these COP cycles tend to go in 3-4 year cycles. So we then started thinking, okay, we need to gear this up to start focusing on the devil rays. So we went through the same process again, this time getting the reef mantas and the devil rays added to the CMS appendices 1 and 2. Then moving through to CITES in 2016 in South Africa, which was also successful. And then we started thinking about, okay, we need to work more locally, national implementation, working with countries to put in place regulations to get these animals added to national protective lists. And then about 10 years go by, and we're working all around the world in fish markets, collecting data, and realizing that the trade is just carrying on as normal. And we realized that if we were going to move from Appendix 2 to 1, which would mean a complete ban on commercial international trade, you really needed to have strong evidence. It's a much higher bar to get from Appendix 2 to 1. And so we got the funding and we set about trying to conduct a global study to review the status of mobilid trade. And Manta, who you're going to hear from next, was leading this study with a number of other colleagues within the Manta Trust. And we reached out to our huge network. We conducted lots and lots of interviews across 74 or so countries. We got together as much data as we could, and we were able to demonstrate that not only has the trade continued, it's increased, it's expanded. The meat trade is occurring in a much greater quantity than we realized. And clearly, the Appendix 2 listing is not working. The trade that we were reporting was completely outmatched by the trade that's being reported to the FAO and the CITES trade databases. So clearly there's a mismatch between what's being reported versus what's happening on the ground. And we also conducted market surveys in the retail markets to also demonstrate that there's a lot of product still being sold online in the source countries, in the sink countries as well. So that was the first global review that we undertook. And concurrently, we were also working on a global review of mobilid fisheries. So this took even more effort across an even bigger team. A huge amount of work went into gathering of this information. This is the big review paper, but there was about a dozen other papers focused more on national efforts to publish on the declines that we were observing as well. So trying to characterize the fishery, what different forms of gear are being used to catch these animals, how they're being landed, where they're being landed, what species, in what numbers. And the total annual catch for mobilids currently is about 250,000 individuals a year. And unfortunately, this is leading to massive declines in their populations. Each line is a different species in a different population. And across all ocean basins, across all species, there is steep declines in these animals, and the declines are accelerating across time as well. So clearly, there's really significant fisheries pressure, there's continued trade, and this information was then used along with lots of other research by a load of other research groups as well to contribute towards CITES red list reassessments for the 3 oceanic devil rays, and that was done late last year, and all 3 moved now to critically endangered, and we'll be working on the remaining species in the coming years with Rima and her team at the SSG. And so that information went into a proposal to have these animals moved to Appendix 1, and that was put forward by the government of Ecuador last year at the COP in Uzbekistan, and amazingly, wonderfully, these animals are now all listed under Appendix 1. So we've seen increases in protections, which is really great. However, we're seeing these animals all move up the threat status as well. So we clearly have lots of work to do. While it's important to achieve these high-level policy gains, it doesn't mean that these animals are protected. And so now we have to pivot to or expand our work on national implementation, species management plans, regional action plans, enforcement capacity, so traceability, what's happening to the ongoing trade. Is it legal where it's illegal? How is it getting through the regulatory frameworks? And then working with the fisheries to try to regulate the bycatch, try to reduce it and reduce mortality. So lots of effort and future work needed. And I want to finish by saying that would not be possible without this massive team that we have here and across the world. And thank you to my wonderful staff and to my network of affiliates and colleagues, and of course to the funders. None of this would be possible without their support. So with that, I will say thank you very much, and I will pass over to Manta.